Hi, and welcome to another episode of Ask Geoff and Lauren, where we answer your double bass related questions. If you have one or you'd like to join the conversation and talk about today's topic, please join us in the comment section below this video. Lauren, let's get straight into it. What is the question for today?
Today we have a question from Anton.
Yeah.
He's asking, is it possible to improve intonation with the help of a clip tuner?
This is a really interesting one, actually, because I know that you've spoken about this a little bit before. I think that it can be a helpful tool at the start when you're playing. I think what's really hard is I had an email from somebody, Lauren, asking me about how can they tell when something's in tune. You know, I say play in tune, but what does that actually mean? And it's really hard to describe I was emailing the guy back.
Yeah.
And essentially it's tension between notes, that you can feel tension, dissonance between two pitches. And when they're in tune with each other, there's a feeling of openness and there's no energy there. And there is energy when they're out of tune. But what does that really mean? I've just said that. And I do actually have a video that I'll put a link for called How Can I Tell If I'm Playing Out of Tune? But I'm really just kind of talking in these terms. It's really hard
People are making bad faces. That's how you know.
Yeah, exactly. If you go, oh, that's right. And I think most people probably do know, but I certainly know at the beginning when I was playing, I didn't feel confident. I mean, in fact, what someone in the study group was asking about playing the note C, and how could they actually know if that was in tune? And I was saying, well, you check it against the open G, and you'll hear if there's any dissonance between the two notes. But what if you haven't done that before? And I guess at this point, it would be a good idea to use a clip-on tuner. So you could say, for instance, you were practicing just going chromatically from the A sharp, B, and then C. And you were checking each time that your little finger was in tune on the note C. You could maybe check with a tuner. You could then actually also listen against the open G and see what that perfect fifth sounds like. See if there's any dissonance there. And if you're in tune, there shouldn't be. I think it's harder to hear your tuning the lower you are as well. Generally, is my experience with that. So I guess if you were practicing that low G, that might be a better example. Maybe the E to the G on the E string. And then you were checking against the open G. And generally what people will do is the handshake won't be quite as wide enough and it'll get too small. And they'll be playing flat with that G. So I think in those situations you can stop, you can look at the tuner. But I think going forward, I would try to put the focus on your ears. And I have never practiced apart from in the very early stages of when I was playing. In fact, I don't think I even had one then, but I certainly, I've had a student who wanted to use one. I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. Because I had a bit of background playing bass guitar before I started, so I knew what playing in tune sounded like. But yeah, so I think it's a good tool if you're a beginner. I've gone around the houses there, Lauren. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think it depends on how you use it. I talk a lot about using a tuner when I practice, just having it up on the stand and using that and a drone. But I'm only doing that when I'm practicing, and I try to use it, and I try to teach my students to use it in the correct way, because I think you could, I think it's less likely that this could happen, but I think you could just 100% depend on, that little light that tells you if you're out of tune or not, and not actually develop your ear. That's the worry that I have with any kind of tuner, and regardless of it being a standalone tuner or a clip-on tuner. If you're using that and you're having to use it when you're on a gig or in a performance and you feel sort of like nervous, I guess, when you don't have it, then I think that's the point where you maybe need to reevaluate how you're practicing.
It's the same as having dots on the side of the bass in the lower positions, and then it's dark and you can't see them, and at that point you're not sure if you're playing in tune.
That's a great point. That's exactly. With all of these things that we talk about, we've talked about dots before, we've talked about lines on the board, and now we're talking about tuners. All of these things I don't have a problem with just by themselves, but if they should be a tool to help you become a better overall player. That shouldn't be that you have to use them anytime you need to play a gig and you want to be in tune. You should be able to hear everything. So at that point, if you are finding you're having to use the tuner when you're on a gig as opposed to just when you're in the practice room, then at that point I would do some ear training exercises with and without your bass and try to improve your ear that way.
Absolutely. So it's a great question there, Anton, and thanks for submitting that. If you'd like to give Anton some ideas of your own about playing with a tuner, maybe you do and you've got good results, or you don't like it, join the conversation in the comment section below, and you can leave your questions for myself and Lauren there as well. So as always, Lauren, thanks for joining me today, and thanks for watching. Thanks, Anton, for your question. We'll see you next time.